Good evening. Welcome to this forum, candidate forum for Council District 4. Glad you're able to be with us tonight. Sadly, Councilmember Tom LaBonge is unable to be here tonight, but we have the other two candidates with us. Mr. Box, Mr. O'Grady, we're grateful that you are here with us tonight. My name is Ryan Bell. I'm the pastor of the Hollywood Adventist Church, where you are right now. My congregation and I have been very involved in the community for the past many years, 6 of which I've been privileged to be a part of this congregation. And in the last 5 years, we've been very involved in the community through our work with LA Voice. And it's also with our partnership with LA Voice that we are bringing this campaign forum to you today. I was thinking as I was preparing for this, that this very night, people the world over are struggling and even risking their lives for democracy. The former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, said that all politics is local. And nowhere, I think, is this more true than in the local city council campaign, where the very decisions that we make affect our lives in the most tangible way, perhaps. And essential to the success of our democracy and its ability to serve all the people is our willingness, each one of us, to participate, to engage in civil public discourse. So thank you for coming tonight, for being a part of what makes our society great. We don't have to risk our lives to be here, and that's a good thing for us. But I think it's important for us to not take our democracy for granted as well. Just a few housekeeping items. This forum is going to last approximately 90 minutes. Each candidate will make an opening statement, after which I'll moderate a time of questions and responses from the candidates. Each candidate will have 2.5 minutes to respond to the question. And at the close, the candidate will have a chance to make a closing statement as well. No questions will be taken from the floor tonight, but a number of you did submit questions through our email online, and we were able to incorporate those into the questions that we'll be asking tonight, so we're grateful to you for sending your questions in that way. One of the values that our congregation holds dear is listening to one another and respectful dialogue. And so to that end, we, of course, ask everyone to be respectful of both of our candidates tonight and as well as the incumbent council member. Even when you disagree with something, I think we can agree that it's important to be respectful. There's also a couple of ushers in the back to help you if you need to find your way to something that you don't know how to find. So please ask someone who looks like they know what they're doing. And with that, I'd like to invite Carolyn from the council member's office to also make a brief comment.
Thank you, Pastor Bell, for allowing me to speak very briefly on behalf of the council member who is really sorry he couldn't be here tonight. He had a conflict on his schedule from the outset, from when this event was scheduled, and he was never able to change it. And he thanks you, first of all, for organizing this, and looks forward to your garden dedication on the weekend. And you've been such a great leader in the Hollywood community, and we're so happy that you're here. I wanted to introduce my colleague, Stacy Marble, who is the field director for the council member and another volunteer on this campaign, as am I, and Sharon Shapiro, who is another volunteer tonight. Anyway, I just have to put in a plug for Tom, whom I met 20 years ago. I was working as a reporter and called City Hall and said, I need someone to show me around, tell me what's going on in this part of the city. And Tom came out, drove me all around, and told me, it was my first drive around with Tom LaBonge. Little did I know that I would spend years of my life doing this later, but he knew every house, every store, told me all about the evolution of Koreatown and what was going on in Hollywood and all different stories of his district. And, he knows this district better than anyone else. He knows the city of Los Angeles better than anybody else. And he works 24/7 to do the best job he can as a council member. So thank you again for allowing me to speak. And I have These are maps for the Oscar street closures that I'll put outside for anybody who is might be driving through the area on Sunday. And Tom recommended that there are two other forums. He recommends the one on the first because he thinks that there will be easier parking possibilities. So I have the flyer for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Box.
My name's Stephen Box. I'm running for City Council representing District 4, a place I'm proud to call home. And in fact, I live right outside the front door, across the street. And I've lived there for almost 14 years. It's where I met my lovely wife. And it's where I kind of got involved in this community, and it's a journey that I haven't looked back on. I was born in Australia to two Nazarene pastors. So when Ryan moved to town, I kind of knew what he was going through. He's also a PK. And when he came to town, the one thing I knew from the way I was raised is the value of a good welcome. And so NC and I said, welcome to the neighborhood, and we cleaned the parking lot as our little gift.
That's right.
But I want to thank you for your welcome tonight, and so we're very honored to be here, and I'm honored to have you all here this evening. When I moved back to LA, it was to work in the entertainment industry, and so I was pretty happy producing films and commercials and music videos. And along the way, NC and I produced a film last year, shot here in East Hollywood, and we established a sustainability standard for the entertainment industry in the process of doing it, which was, of course, the subject of a documentary film, Real Sustainable. Some of you folks may know me as the budget advocate, and in fact, some of the folks on the campaign are folks that were part of Budget LA, which was our effort to work with the city to balance the city's budget. And I was there every year last year fighting for the departments that I think are essential to our great city mandate, like the Department of Disability, Cultural Affairs, Parks, Recreation, Human Relations. And some of you may know me as a transportation advocate. In fact, it was one of the first things that brought us to Hollywood United was asking, how can we cross that busy street? And why is there an issue with traffic on Franklin? And along the way, I've become a transportation funding expert with State of California. I work on safe routes of school money. But in all of these opportunities to be of service, whether it's just cleaning our streets, like when the empty lot across the street became an eyesore, whether it's working to deliver safe streets that are crossable, at every turn, what I've encountered is a city in crisis. So we have a crisis with the budget. We have a crisis with collapsing infrastructure. We have a crisis with traffic congestion. We have a crisis with development run amok. And we're in a city that I would consider to be in the midst of a crisis of leadership, which is what brings us here tonight. And that's why I'm running for city council. Because, you're going to hear people say they're angry and they're fed up and they're not going to take it anymore. And you're going to hear people say, please, we just need some more time to work on this. And I just stand before you as a guy that says, together I think we can create a great city. And I'd like to be your partner in greatness, and I'd like to move LA forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for for joining us this evening, and I appreciate it.
Mr. O'Grady.
Is this on? Yes?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us here. Thank you, Stephen. That was great. My name is Tomás O'Grady. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and reared in the west of Ireland, and before moving to Los Angeles, my wife, Justine, and I restored old brownstones in Hoboken, New Jersey. We worked hard, we lived frugally, we did our homework, and we did pretty well. America has been good to me and my family. America has worked for me. I came to the United States with $80 in my pocket. I started off life as a carpenter, and we just finished our dream home in the hills of Los Feliz. Now I'm running for Los Angeles City Council. That's pretty amazing. My story, though, I don't think is no longer possible in this country, and I would say it's particularly impossible in this city. Whether you're trying to open a small business, get a decent public education, now even basic library service, this city has failed all but a few of us. LA is the homeless capital of the United States. And yet we pay our city council people the highest salary in the United States. Something has run amok in this city. We've lost our way. That's why I'm running for city council. Not to be a politician, because I am a terrible politician, but to be a public servant. I'm remembering my lines here. I'm doing the best I can, so I'm sorry. Leadership is not about cheerleading or pretending to fill a pothole or showing up for photo ops. Leadership is about courage. It's about admitting when you're wrong. It's about talking straight. It's about bringing people together and then getting out of the way. It's not about hogging the limelight. For me, it's about leading by example. It's about walking the walk. And above all, it's about action, not words. I was recently described in a blog as a naive idealist. They're right. I'm naive. I was so naive that I thought if we put in an organic garden at King Middle School 2 years ago, that it just might, act as some kind of catalyst for that school. Thomas Starr King Middle School was the second most improved middle school in all of Los Angeles last year. Justine and I, my wife sitting right here, we were so naive that 10 years ago we said if we lived frugally for 10 years, we could pay off our mortgage. We are mortgage-free today. So I would submit to you that this city could do with a few more naive people in City Hall. My name is Tomas O'Grady, and I'm respectfully asking for your vote. Thank you.
We'll begin with the questions and responses. We'll start over on this side with Mr. Box. And the first question is, how do you feel about U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East? I'm just kidding. It's the wrong campaign. I'm sorry. Maybe someday. I am curious about that, but we'll talk about that another time. Council District 4 boasts one of the largest municipal parks, the largest municipal park in the country, Griffith Park. But in other communities in CD4 and Los Angeles as a whole, are a concrete jungle where children don't have any place to play and there aren't safe environments for them to just be with their families. So if elected, how would you make parks more accessible to the communities that lack them?
Well, I treat them as a priority, and I believe that the elements of a great city are public safety, public works, public health, and public education, and that they're connected. And I believe that parks are an integral element of public safety, that it's an essential element of our public works commitment to a great city, that it absolutely is the essence of a healthy community. Your ability to walk across the street, sit outside with some air that's breathable. And I do believe that children do better when they can have access to a park, when they feel safe moving outside. I believe it's an integral element. And in fact, there's a campaign down the street to turn the empty lot at Garfield Place and Hollywood Boulevard into a park. Not just a park, but a memorial to Armenian genocide. And this is an empty lot. It's been empty since we've been here. And in fact, we don't have any space around here to gather. And it's absolutely unacceptable because the funds that come to the city, whether it's Quimby fees from developers, whether it's money because it's close to a station, in other words, there are resources that are actually mismanaged, and it's your money that's being mismanaged. And there are large visions. For example, the Hollywood Cat Park has a representative here, someone that wants to turn the entire 101 freeway, well, not the entire 101 freeway, that would be a nice vision, huh? The 101, to put a cap over the 101 freeway and actually create a zipper that connects two communities. But there's also a very small piece of property right around the corner, the Caltrans property. When you pulled the aloe vera plants from, and redid the landscaping, NC and I hauled all those aloe veras over there and planted them on Caltrans property. There's little examples of how we take little bits of space. And we have some friends here that were part of Parking Day LA when we actually took parking spaces and turned them into parks. That's the kind of dialogue we're having and the kind of uphill battle we have on our hands. But I assure you that parks are an absolute priority. We have a committee, Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging, that's responsible not just for the largest urban wilderness park in the United States of America, Griffith Park, but also that little piece of property around the corner, the little empty lot down the street, and lots of other opportunities to make our neighborhoods healthier, safer, and more enjoyable. So it's an absolute commitment.
So let me just compliment the Hollywood Freeway Park. That is a fantastic project. And if I understand it correctly, it's about $200 million. And let me compliment that organization and the way that that was planned, the way the community was included. I think that is one of the few examples, if you ask me, how to design, how to plan a project, how to bring people together. I cannot think of one thing to criticize about that process. And at $200 million, that is a fantastic deal to build a park. To build a park over the freeway, when you compare to the Boston Big Dig, which cost I don't know how many billions, and that's the same. It will be the same effect, which is joining those two neighborhoods. I've done this a few times already. Pocket parks. I wrote the MOU for LUSD for a new community garden at Mitchell Terrena, which we are now working on presently. My friend Leonardo designed it. And in my proposal, in my platform, is to have LUSD, the library, and the Parks Department work in concert. These are all agencies that are broke, and so we need to have economies of scale. LUSD can open up its real estate during the summer, and the libraries ought to get into the business of after-school programs. There are other cities do this already. Pasadena does it, and we ought to be doing it here in LA. And with regard to, I agree with Stephen, pocket parks, this is the perfect time for the city of Los Angeles to snap up really inexpensive real estate so as to turn them into small pocket parks. It is a perfect time. Real estate is down by almost 30%. Vacant lots are down so much more. And yeah, parks, with regard to the Griffith Park thing, we need to build small, tiny parks closer to where the people are. So the people don't have to drive all the way up to Griffith Park. And we ought to leave Griffith Park alone for what it's meant to be. Does that mean over or a warning? Does that
Warning.
a warning?
30-second warning.
Okay. So, did I answer the question properly? Did I? Was that satisfactory?
I
Yes.
think so.
Thank you.
Nicely done, nicely done. We're going to begin with you on question 2. Other cities and neighborhoods have implemented strategies that allow them to be pedestrian-friendly. Hollywood, in comparison, is a much more visited and well-known city, and yet has a long way to go to be truly walkable as a community. How would you propose addressing the issues of transportation, parking, and walkability as it pertains to the community of Hollywood?
Okay, again, I'm more into action rather than words. I'm less into vague responses to questions and more about what we can do tomorrow. I joined the Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Council almost 3 years ago, I suppose now. And right off the bat, we formed a new green committee. And our focus was on finding all the missing trees on all the streets so that we can have a real tree canopy. And to date, Farm Fearless, the organization that I founded, has managed to get 300 trees into the ground in all of those streets that are missing them. So a tree canopy in this city is critical in order for people to walk in shade. The mayor of Los Angeles and the incumbent, they have many, many press conferences about the Million Tree Program, constantly talking about it, yet the trees are not getting into the ground. So tree canopy, number one, obviously. And that's about it, I suppose. We like to walk down Hillhurst, but frankly, at some times of the year, it's impossible because it's roasting outside. Mm-hmm. So greening spaces, tree canopy, would make it easier for more people to walk. Mm-hmm. So, thank you.
And to you, sir.
Transportation, parking, and walkability in Hollywood. Nancy and I went to Sacramento last year in support of AB 766, which was the Safe Streets bill. It would give local communities control over traffic control and the establishment of speed limits. Last year, I went to City Hall on a regular basis opposing each and every speed limit increase that made it through the Transportation Commission, the Transportation Committee, and City Council. And of course, the incumbent, who's on the Transportation Committee, is the vice chair. Each and every one of them he voted in favor of. Our streets aren't safe because of the speed of traffic and because the priority of motor vehicle traffic. Our streets simply aren't crossable. Police officers die in greater numbers from car collisions than from gunshot wounds. Our streets are under siege. And so I've been working at the policy level to change that. And we meet on a monthly basis with the LAPD. As a cyclist, I can assure you I'm acutely sensitive to the fact that the simple quality of our streets, or I should say lack of quality streets, contributes to traffic collisions. 60% of all traffic collisions have road conditions as a factor in the collision itself. So our streets aren't safe for pedestrians. They're not safe for cyclists. They're not safe for those that ride mass transit. Some of the buses on Wilshire actually lose their windshields. People end up falling on buses when they hit the potholes on Wilshire. That's how significant the holes are. And they're certainly not safe for those in motor vehicles. And in fact, it's not even news anymore when someone's injured or killed in a traffic collision, because it's just a common occurrence. Specifically for Hollywood, there are opportunities for us to grab a hold of our plan and to actually, the city's general plan, and to actually add elements that make a particular community a pedestrian-oriented community, which would mean that we would have engineering solutions, not just lowering the speed limit, but bulb outs so that the pedestrians are visible when they get to a crosswalk. Ped scrambles, so there's a moment when no cars move, and pedestrians have the entire intersection. You see other great cities, you've seen it. You can go to Pasadena. You can go anywhere in Europe, and you'll see something that'll make you think, wow, that'd be nice. How about a roundabout, which in some cities is actually also a bioswale and an opportunity for water reclamation, an environmental solution. Was that a warning? Okay. I never played hockey, so I don't know what the flags mean.
You'll know the convention.
So there's lots of things that we could do. In fact, I'm doing them. I'm working on them hard, and it's probably one of the things that I have the most relationships with City Hall and the different departments, from the Bureau of Street Services to the LAPD to transportation. These are the relationships that I've built up as an activist, someone who's been fighting, not just within City Hall, but at the county level, with the Metro, with the state of California, and in Sacramento, because I think that people, one of their most basic rights is the freedom to move safely and free of fear. And in fact, I wrote the Cyclist Bill of Rights, and that's actually point number one, something we took all the way to City Council and used as a concept to start the action.
Thank you. The next question, we'll begin with Mr. Box. Many people who work in Hollywood can't afford to live in Hollywood. Additionally, we have I preempted my friend Gumdrop Lou, who's going to be asking this question because it is something that he knows something about.
Hi, my name is Gumdrop Lou. My son is being born on April 18th. His name is Denebzi. I'm an abnormal person. I'm not what you consider normal. In fact, everything I do is artistic. I came to Hollywood. Early on, I was born with syphilis. They thought I was retarded. I had a lot of problems. But it turned out I was pretty intelligent. I was living on the streets for 3 years. My mom had died. My brother had overdosed in heroin. My sister was on heroin. I lost pretty much everyone. I had nobody left in my family. So I sleep in a cardboard box with rags and towels and a dog and an earache and a cough and a cold and a prayer. Just me, God, the lights, and the stars. Day after day for like 3 years. I started thinking about stuff, and one day I said, I want something. I'm hungry. I desire what people have that I don't. Currently, what I'm doing is, you sure?
Let's
right to the question. Okay,
why don't you
anyways.
get to the question?
Just so you know who I am. Sorry about that. All right, there you go. Question.
He's a really interesting guy. You should get to know him afterwards.
Yeah, okay. I would throw how and then home in this question. Many people who work in Hollywood cannot afford to live in Hollywood. Additionally, we have a serious homelessness problem. United Way and Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce recently released a 5-year plan to end chronic veteran homelessness in Los Angeles. If elected, how would you, 2 gentlemen, 3, address the need for more affordable housing in Hollywood and support efforts like the United Way Home for Good?
Thank you.
Welcome.
We'll start with Mr. Box.
Well, let's talk about homelessness. 40% of we're a city in crisis, a budget crisis. And one of the big expenses we have is public safety, the police and fire department. And 40% of our Hollywood Fire Department is spent addressing and offering primary medical care to the homeless population in Hollywood. Of our homeless population, 25% of them are veterans. So we're all in favor of peace, and I can't think of anybody that says don't bring them home. So while we want to bring our soldiers home, the fact remains we don't connect them well with services, and statistically, they're going to go 3 places, Miami, Phoenix, and Los Angeles, and statistically, a lot of them are going to end up on the street. And we don't do a good job of connecting people with the services. And that goes with resources for the homeless. That goes for the services that are needed by those that are in crisis. And that goes for good housing where the jobs are. We have a knack for building housing in one area and creating a transit problem because the jobs are in another. So, for example, Susan, I think it was 5 years ago when the Gower Transitional Housing Project came before the Hollywood United Neighborhood Council, and my goodness, we thought it was a great solution, but the drama it churned when people try to create a facility that actually provides services. So it was a lot of drama, and it was a demonstration of we have a long way to go before we actually start connecting people with services. I speak as someone who has some experience. Before I came back to LA, I was a Habitat for Humanity's director for the state of Kentucky. And I was also part of workforce development for the state of Kentucky and a Carnegie literacy instructor as we addressed how do you give people the skills they need, the services they need in order to participate in a robust economy and connect with housing. And quite simply, it's connecting the funding that we fail to execute on with the problems that we fail to acknowledge. Because one of the simplest things you can do to get ignored in Hollywood is be in need, and you will be ignored, except by those that are sitting around me, of course. And that's how a lot of us have met, is in addressing some of these situations. And so I'm surrounded by people who I consider to be great partners in greatness, but we have a long way to go as a city in connecting people with solutions.
Thank you. Mr. O'Grady, homelessness and housing.
Well, I'll tell you how not to solve homelessness. The incumbent Tom LaBonge, a couple of years ago, was one of the people who voted for the LAPD to reduce homelessness by criminalizing them downtown. And yes, for a small period of time, LA had a smaller homeless population because they were in jail, okay? The notion that if you don't have a home, that you're a criminal is just, I don't know, it's just beyond belief to me, okay? I'm not even that liberal, it's beyond belief to me. Another favorite institution of Tom LaBonge is the CRA. We had a debate last week, and were he polite enough to come tonight, we could debate him again. He said Hollywood has come back. That's what he said. Who has Hollywood come back for? So they demolished all this affordable places that people were living in, and they built beautiful luxury high-risers. It's new housing, of course, but nobody can afford to live in them. In North Atwater today, they've declared Atwater to be blighted because it doesn't look pretty enough. There are people living there. Where do you think they're going to go if the CRA is going to come in? They're going to come in, they're going to eminent domain, they're going to knock it down, they're going to build something beautiful for rich people. This city is not serious about diverting its assets and its wealth to the folks who need it the most. That's why I am the only candidate in this race that's committed to cutting my salary in half. Not as a campaign stunt, but somebody has got to lead by example somewhere. It is utterly criminal, if you ask me, to sit in an office in City Hall and make almost $250,000 per year when blocks from City Hall you have homeless people. I don't understand how you can sleep at night acting like that. By me going into city council, I want to bring back a conscience into this thing. And the way you do it is by leading by example. Sacrifice yourself, number one, and encourage others then to step up so as to divert money and resources to this major problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Mr. O'Grady. According to a Nielsen 2010 report, in our zip code here, 90028, only 59% of residents age 16 and above are currently employed. As a city council member, how would you work to stimulate the local economy and foster new jobs?
Well, number one is public education. And I have a track record here. I went into King Middle School. I went into the principal, Dr. Murphy. Not because I knew anything about education, but I thought they could do with the help. And I said, what would you like me to do? And she said, you know what? We would love a garden. So we put in a garden. Simple as that. It's just a stupid little garden. Okay? And somehow, and I have no explanation for it, teachers got a spring in their step, and education is getting better in that school. So nobody can get a job unless they're educated. We're at Franklin together, you and I, and the success of that school and the education is because we're all involved. We've rolled up our sleeves, and we're just getting involved. There's no ego. You have to leave your ego at the door at Franklin. There are no photographers or press or anything like that. We're just getting the job done. And Franklin, we got an award last year because we had narrowed the achievement gap between the folks who are doing the best and the folks who are doing the least. I hope I'm using the right term there. Sorry. With regard to, so first we need education. And I mean basic. I'm not talking about third level. I mean coming out of high school with a basic ability to read and write and to be able to comport yourself in a way that would allow you to get a job. With regards to economic activity, my friends Aram and Rose Serobian took them almost a year to open up a restaurant which employs 42 people in Los Feliz. Why? Not because of the regulations, because they're all good. All the environmental regulations, parking regulations, they all make sense. It was that it was so confusing for them to figure out how to obey those regulations. They should be able to obey those in a few days. It took almost a year because each department wasn't talking to each other. It's completely confusing. And of course, the council office had to get involved because they always have to get involved. We need to take personality out of this city hall. We need to make it very simple. You want to open up a restaurant? Here are the 53 items that you need to do to open up a restaurant. They're listed here in a 53-page booklet. Come back with those 53 items, and you can open up your restaurant. There are so many entrepreneurial and creative people in this city. The city is stopping them from opening businesses because of this confusion. And it's confusion. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
Mr. Box, economy and jobs in Hollywood.
I write for CityWatchLA.com. And the last 3 articles have been on the economy and how we can create jobs and stimulate, support small businesses. Small businesses produce 65% of the jobs that have been created in our economy over the last generation. And in fact, last year, small businesses were prevailing while large industry was actually losing jobs. And so, yet in the city of LA, the small business person is actually outgunned, outnumbered, and quite honestly faces an uphill battle, which even City Hall can't figure out. And in this most recent article that comes out tonight, I wrote about the formation of an organization or a nonprofit such as LA City Works, which would be a one-stop shop that a small business person could go to and get everything they need. We already have a model for this. We do it for the film industry. So if I came to town and wanted to shoot a film called Job, I could make one phone call and get a permit, whether I was a large studio or a student film, and I could pull permits in many of the cities around here, the LAUSD, the Forestry Department, State of California. I could find out what the rules and regulations are if I were employing minors, if I was going to have pyrotechnics, if I was serving food. I could find out all of the rules, and I could do it all with one stop, and someone would actually come and monitor the set and help me. But if I just wanted to open a business, of course, it's going to be an uphill battle. And so the city of LA is not good at this because their opening move right now is to find out what's going on. In fact, they don't know. So I think it's critical that we actually form a one-stop shop such as LA City Works, a proposal that I've made. You can read about it tonight. But it's based on my experience in the city of Los Angeles. So I've operated businesses in LA. And our campaign office is in a small business, a friend of ours that we've been working with who just wants to rent electric community car share to the community, and it's been nothing but an uphill battle. They've sent him to Sacramento rather than saying, oh my gosh, somebody who wants to open a business and pay taxes on Hollywood Boulevard and revitalize the street, provide a service. So we don't embrace, we actually create obstacles. We don't remove obstacles, we actually keep telling them anywhere but here. And so that's one way I would work to stimulate the local economy, which of course produces jobs for those that need them most.
Is that it? Thank you. You could go on, but yeah, I think that's.
Thank you.
Everywhere we go in this congregation and in this community, we've watched members of our community suffer because of the lending practices of large banks and their impact on the economy. And so what would your position be on the current responsible banking ordinance being proposed in Los Angeles City Council?
Well, I think it's a very significant and step. I think it's a first step. I think there's a lot more we could do. But you're very accurately identifying an opportunity for us to protect those that are most vulnerable. And I think that's the essence of good city government, to protect those that need it the most. Whether it's streets that are crossable and protecting those that are most vulnerable, whether it's the fact that we have people from around the world and many different cultures who fall prey to the complexity of something so simple as trying to survive. And in this particular case, this also applies to small businesses from the prior question. You know, access to capital is what holds 60% of our small businesses from moving forward, which means they sit precariously perched on that, I told you they would go out of business, which means that individuals are perched on that precarious, I told you they were a bad credit risk. You see what I mean? It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that individuals, small businesses, families live in an environment where it's so difficult for us to reach out for help. In other words, it's easy to get lost in a big city of 4 million people. And I've lived in some very small towns and some very large cities, some larger than Los Angeles and some as small as 3,000 people. And the fact of the matter is, sometimes in a small town, people know who you are and when you're in crisis. But in a city like Los Angeles, the system sometimes is so overwhelming that we don't even know our neighbors or the fact that they're in crisis, and this is a first step to protecting people. The larger step would be to create a mechanism so that people could actually reach out for help and figure out how to navigate this system. So this is a bit of policy and protection, and I think the next step is, just like we do for the film industry, and just like I propose we do for small businesses, the idea that people could find some way to reach out and say help. Because keep in mind, it's also the answer with the homelessness. Like, who do you ask? And a person in crisis has lost the ability to ask for help. I was a lifeguard when I was in college. I went to school in San Diego. And they taught us to never wait until someone needs help. So we were instructed to swim out when you saw them start to come up for breath with their hair hanging in their face, because that's a person getting tired. And so we were instructed to swim out and say, hello, how you doing? And sometimes they'd say, you know what, not so good. So if as a city we were able to provide that kind of delivery of services, not based on crisis, but based on a standard for protecting those that need help, for removing obstacles for those that are most vulnerable, and for making sure that people don't prey on our neighbors. So, good step, one of many that needs to happen.
Thank you.
So I agree with Stephen. Of course, the banking ordinance is a first step, but it's almost like, what is that saying? Closing the gate after the horse gets out. I think that's the way it was back home. It's back to education again. I teach a sustainability class on Tuesdays at King Middle School. And I often ramble away from gardening, and I talk to the students about money. And they ask me how I got on in the United States, and I tell them my cheesy American dream story about my $80 in my pocket. And they often yawn sometimes, because I say it 100 times, because I'm proud of the story. And I try to tell them the difference between labor and capital, and how in America you try to labor as fast as you can so you can amass some capital, so you can use that capital to give you some interest, and you won't have to labor so hard as you get older. So what we're missing, I think, in this city, or I think with a lot of young people in particular, is they don't get how money works, or how you save money, how you spend money, how you invest something and then it gives you a return over a 30-year period. So one of the things I talked about is this, libraries and schools working together. This is a perfect place for an after-school program, for middle school students or for high school students. Learn about a mortgage. Why is it a 30-year mortgage? What is the advantage of buying a house? It's sort of I simplify it down to, I invested in real estate when I was younger. I'm buying a cow, okay? And that cow gives X amount of milk. And I'll pay more for the cow if the cow gives more milk. And that's just missing. I think a lot of people don't even get how money adds up anymore. And I think that's a lot of the reasons why a lot of people got into a lot of trouble. I will be I'm slightly less sympathetic to some folks, and I don't think it's in this area, but a lot of people did borrow way beyond their means. And by the way, this is my wife Justine right here, and our children are here, but we've always lived frugally, and because I always would worry that we wouldn't have enough money for the future. So we would never spend 100% of what we made. And I think that a lot of people lost that in the last 10 years. And I would hope they'd get that back so people don't get into trouble. And thank heavens for us, we're mortgage free because we did save our pennies. So thank you. Yeah.
The youth of Hollywood have told us, as we've talked to them through the years, that they need safe places to go after school. You've talked already a lot about education. A lot of the young people in our city and even in this neighborhood here are vulnerable to drugs and violence, gangs. And if elected, how would you help to address the needs of our youth, in particular things that, since you've already talked about education a little bit, and we're going to talk about that again in a minute, after school and in our just community life?
So after-school programs are the cheapest way that you can prevent kids getting into gangs. Libraries are a really cheap way for kids to hang out when school is closed. The incumbent closed the libraries for 2 days a week. I took action on this. I met with Martine Gomez, who's the head of the library, and a guy called Ry Romer, who's the head of the Librarians Guild. We sat down for a week. We went through the city budget. We located the $9 million that would have kept the library open for 2 days, the 2 days that are missing. And of course, some of that was staff members in CD4, some of whom are here tonight. And we're paying you guys here tonight. And this is the shame of it. So we identified all these savings, and one was for the council members to take a cut. The other was for the council staff to cut it from 20 down to 10. So it was $9 million. It's almost like nothing for 2 days a week. And of course, we didn't receive a response. Back to my thing about sharing assets. LAUSD and the Parks Department need to start talking to each other. They need to be joined at the hip. Those keys need to be handed over during the summer to the Parks Department so we can open up all those. Those are existing assets that are right there today that are locked in a padlock all through the summer. And this is what the future has got to be about. There is no more money left because our politicians have botched it up. It's all gone, okay? So what we need to do is use our existing assets, share them, and so that kids have a safe place to go in the after school. Finally, the thing that I'm trying to create now, and I'm not going as fast as I want to, is the youth club. I grew up with a youth club in the west of Ireland. That's what we had. We used to go on Friday nights and we'd play ping pong and we'd listen to some disco music. And so Dr. Murphy thinks it's a great idea, and we'd use the gym at King so that my daughter would have a place to go on Friday nights. She's now 12. Soon she's going to want to go out on her own. I want her to go locally, play some ping pong, and I'm sure she's going to have a boyfriend pretty soon, and God forbid. And so, yeah, give them a place to be and give them things to do, and they're not going to get into trouble. So that's it. Thank you.
I got a little hung up on your daughter having a boyfriend. I'm sorry. It distracted me for a moment. My daughter's 10, and I can't quite imagine that. Youth issues here in Hollywood.
The answers to many of these questions are connected, as are the issues themselves. And so when we talk about safe streets, we're already starting to answer this particular question also. Our streets aren't safe for kids because we haven't made them safe for ourselves. And in fact, letting your kids walk to school or ride their bikes to school is, it's a sign of neglect now for your children. And in fact, the worst traffic in our neighborhood is around Marshall High School, as every parent drops their kid off and the cars are stacked 3 deep. And all of this brings us back to parks, streets that are safe, streets that are filled with people, streets that are filled with us, making them safer. And the fact of the matter is, it's kind of a strange thing to see a pedestrian in this neighborhood. So strange that we all look and say, what's up? There's a pedestrian here. That's strange. He must be up to something. But that also goes for kids. I work on safe routes to school funding, and in some neighborhoods, it's not the speed of traffic that interferes with kids' ability to get to school. They actually don't go to school when there's a flare-up of gang activity. And so we had to find solutions on how we could get them to school safely without having them walk through certain neighborhoods. So what we're dealing with here is the lack of parks, the lack of eyes on the street, the lack of human beings participating in a vibrant street life. The fact that we actually have development that takes place that creates more fortress-style buildings where people conduct their lives inside as opposed to connecting with other people. There are so many solutions to this problem, including why is it that Head Start takes place in a strip mall, the libraries open up a little bit later, the kids go to school. In other words, so many opportunities to connect are passed up simply because we don't partner in greatness. And one of the things I love about this particular church, and it's the first time I've ever sat in this seat, and I'm quite honored, but it's not the first time we've been here. We've been here with so many different organizations because this church, for example, is a great partner where people feel safe, comfortable, and always welcome. So our LA Bike Working Group met here. The Eastwood Coalition met here. That was years ago.
Going back.
The Hollywood United Neighborhood Council meets here. In other words, so many people feel like this is a great place to meet and to connect. And I think that we don't encourage that enough in the city of LA and look for ways to work together. And in fact, when I was working on neighborhood council elections, 4 times in 1 year we got locked out. And we're part of the city of LA and we got locked out. So the city of LA doesn't do a good job itself of forging relationships, which does set a bad example for us to look for small opportunities to forge relationships. All of which brings us to the simplest thing we can do is make our streets safer, make sure our parks are open and that we have lots of them, make sure our libraries are open. So I agree with Tomas that sometimes it's the simplest things, the assets that we have, including our friendships, relationships, and opportunities to make all of the assets that are part of a great city open all the time, and that we participate to make sure that our streets are populated with people keeping an eye on the streets. And that's when we'll have safe streets that are good for kids.
One more kid-oriented question, and this will be a little bit of a challenge for you because you've already talked about education so much, so you have to think of something new to say about education. Education reform has been called the new civil rights issue. I guess a lot of people want to claim that, so there's a lot of new civil rights issues, but it's one of them. LAUSD, of course, has no shortage of problems and is governed by an organization that is not directly under city council control. So how do you use your influence as a city council member, if you were elected, to improve the quality of education for our community?
Well, I do believe that education is a civil right, and in fact, I think that Bill Cosby was pushing that message hard. And I do think that it's reasonable for us to reevaluate some of the essential things that we need to grab a hold of, and I think that's probably the most significant one on the horizon for us. The city of LA is famous for saying, I'm sorry, that's not our jurisdiction, and that goes for literally anything you want. Anything. And education is one of the classics. And they're absolutely wrong. City Hall is absolutely wrong when they say it's not our responsibility, it's not our jurisdiction. They're our children, they're our neighbors, it's our community, they're our schools. And it's our opportunity to forge relationships, not look for other people to be responsible for something else. The school board, it has been said, is in charge of construction, not instruction. And I think that our priorities are flipped. If you think about it, the LAUSD is the largest developer in the city of LA. Yet, when they built the new school, the one downtown, by the freeway?
The curly
Yeah.
Q one, number something.
The arts school?
Yeah, the arts.
Yeah, no, the one downtown the one downtown. We couldn't qualify them for safe routes to school because they were non-ADA compliant. The school said, well, we teach the kids, you got to get them here. And the city of LA said, well, we don't qualify for funding because you're not even ADA compliant. So we can't qualify for safe routes to school money to get the kids safely there. In other words, you have in the city of LA so many opportunities for a diplomat to rise to the occasion and say, I think we can do better, I think we can work together, I think we can share assets rather than compete for assets. That's not happening, but I assure you, I'm working on relationships with the LAUSD, with the Metro, with Caltrans, with federal and state funding, looking for opportunities to forge relationships so that we can partner in greatness with the LAUSD. And in fact, the CRA, if it were abolished, would result in $329 per child coming to LA County. And yet the City Council has fought to defend the CRA and to hide $930 million. That $329 per child would put $220 million into LAUSD right now, while we're considering pink slips and laying off teachers. All of which brings us to this. Our current City Council is at odds with the LAUSD, and that must stop. And I can promise you, I will absolutely do everything I can to forge a relationship with the LAUSD and make them partners in greatness.
Thank you. Tomas.
So I'm already doing this stuff. Rule number one, as Woody Allen used to say, is you got to show up. Our current city councilman sends his children to private schools. Why? Because he can afford it. We pay him so much, okay? So much money that he sends his kids to private schools. My children go to public school. I consider it an honor to go to public school, but I particularly consider it a public servant. It is incumbent upon you to send your children to public school so that you have a self-interest in bringing public schools up. Because you better believe, if I'm in city council and my daughter is in a school, I will not tolerate anything but the best for my daughter, and thus I'll be bringing up all of the rest of the school with it. My daughter's at King. I won't tolerate anything but the best for my daughter. So I'm there working, cleaning the bathrooms, advocating. Sometimes I'm even yelling because I'm frustrated. But I'm not just bringing up my own daughter's education, I'm helping everyone in that school. I'm designing a new garden for a special needs program at Roosevelt High. Just about being innovative, I left a message for both campaigns, Martinez and Huizar today. See who wants to give us the $9,000 first. So I pitched one against the other. I don't care. I want to get the garden built. So few pennies could fix so much in the LAUSD system. We're doing it at Franklin. There's no egos involved. We're just in there. We're getting it done. We're doing it at King. Politicians use schools as photo ops. That's what they do. I planted an orchard at King Middle School about 3 weeks ago. I got there early in the morning. I hauled all the trees. I dug all the holes. We got all the thing done. I had to wait because Tom LaBonge came with his entourage. Okay? This is not a joke. This is actually... It's pretty insulting, actually. He came with his entourage. I had to dig the hole. I had to wait for him so he could plant the tree and give his little speech and use those kids. His kids are not even at the school. So, you know what? You know, Stephen, you're completely right. We need to engage with public schools, but we need to be there. We need to have a self-interest. And that's what I've been doing, and that's what I will continue to do. Thank you.
If you were to survey this community, traffic is a perpetual complaint, not just here, but throughout Los Angeles. But beyond being annoying, it contributes to air pollution and fragments families as people spend hours on the road. What would you do to mitigate the traffic flow problems in this area? Specifically, a member of our community wrote in with this question to our email address in preparation for this event about the potential widening of Forest Lawn Drive, which goes through Griffith Park. Are solutions like this the right approach to addressing the traffic concerns in our community? And if not, what can be done?
Well, widening Forest Lawn Drive is not the solution at all. And frankly, building more roads is not the solution at all. The 3010 plan, we need to get it done. We need to get it done quickly. But one of the issues right now, society has so little trust in government even spending its money wisely to build this. And the design for the new mass transit and all the various projects, it is a good plan. It's nicely put together. The problem is nobody wants to pay for it. Why don't they want to pay for it? Because they no longer trust that our government are going to spend that money wisely. Laura Chick, who is my hero, she said recently, And they criticized her. What the hell is the difference? It's 20 grand out of a $28 billion budget. She said, the moment a taxpayer hears about that $20,000 being wasted, you've lost that taxpayer next time you go back and ask them to vote for a bond or a parcel tax. I voted against the last LUSD parcel tax because I was not convinced at that time that LUSD were going to spend my money wisely. So, number one, we need mass transit. It needs to be a massive project. We need to do it in the next 10 years. But in order to get voters to allow us to do it, we need to build trust and convince them again that we're spending their money wisely. And that is my job number one, rebuild the trust between government and voters. And I guarantee you, voters are waiting to step up and fund all these good projects so we can solve this traffic issue. And it ain't widening any roads. That is the wrong way to go. Thank you.
Widening that road is absolutely not the right thing to do, to answer that question very specifically. And more generally, we have a tension in the city between the Department of Transportation and Planning. One department says bigger, faster, wider, and the other department says livable communities, lovable communities, put housing where jobs are, put jobs where housing is, walkable streets. And those two departments are at odds, and that has to change. I currently am winning two battles with the Metro and the state of California. One is for the Gerald Desmond Bridge, which is $1 billion project, which probably doesn't impact any of us here. It's in San Pedro, Long Beach. But the reason it's relevant is because it's $1 billion project. And when you set a standard on $1 billion project, you can kind of expect the standard to apply to your curb cut. It's not the other way around. So if we fight all day over the curb cut, we'll never, ever impact the $1 billion projects. The second one I'm winning on is the 405 Sepulveda Pass. And in fact, they're changing the design of the bridge, the Mulholland bridge there, because we win by invoking simple standards that we have to fight for right now. And one of them, quite simply, is the Complete Streets Act. When you touch something, you have to leave it so that it's good for everybody. That's a law that went into effect on January 1. I shouldn't have to know California state law in order to cross the street, but I do. And in fact, we invoked the Griffith Park land deed in order to walk up the hill. We invoked Los Angeles Municipal Code to park our bikes. We've invoked California state law to ride on Crystal Springs. We shouldn't have to, as people, fight so hard for things that belong to us and are guaranteed to us by law. But in both cases, the Gerald Desmond and the 405 Sepulveda, it was simple ADA compliance that allowed us to win and prevail, which means that now, in both cases, and it should be on all of our streets, they should be good for everybody. The Complete Streets Act says it's good for pedestrians, it's good for cyclists, it's good for those that use mass transit, and it's good for motorists. So the notion that we should be widening our streets is the part of a paradigm that says that your street is a cut-through option for a freeway. And freeway traffic belongs on freeways. And if they're congested, that doesn't mean you should take Canyon. And one of the first issues that brought us to the Hollywood United Neighborhood Council's Transportation Committee was, how do we stop the cut-through traffic? Because they're shortcutting, and pets were getting killed, which meant that a child would be next, and in fact, at Franklin and Canyon, there were some fairly significant collisions occurring because people were shooting through the streets. So the answer to all of this is we've got to have standards we can count on. Our streets belong to us. Cut-through traffic is completely unacceptable. Our streets aren't freeway alternatives. And I have fought and am fighting and will fight for your right to protect your community, our neighborhood, your home, from those that threaten your safety, and that includes the local streets like this one, all the way to the big one on the backside of Griffith Park.
We talked a moment ago about the need for affordable housing for people who work in Hollywood, and we've talked about the importance of proximity of housing. This need is often in tension, as I've been in conversation in the community, with the need for historic preservation and concerns about the character of neighborhoods. A CD4 resident wrote concerning this issue, and he said, given Hollywood Grove Historic Preservation Overlay Zone is in this district, do you support the HPOZ, and how significant do you feel HPOZs are to the future of Los Angeles? So specifically this, but more generally the tension between historic preservation and the need for some development for new housing.
So the HPOZ is a historic preservation overlay zone, which would mean that the homes north of Franklin, that entire community would be protected so that Ryan and I couldn't put our money together and go and build some monstrous thing and violate the personality and character of that neighborhood. And one of the things that's absolutely charming about our neighborhood is that even on the walk over here, we talk about, well, this church has history. Mm-hmm. And at one time, there was going to be a radio station on top. But the buildings in our neighborhoods have stories. We had a fundraiser in Los Feliz in a home that had a book written about it. I mean, our homes and our architecture and our neighborhoods are literally rock stars. And I'm always encountering tourists that are wandering around the book looking at a particular architect or particular where history was made. And so there's absolutely every reason in the world to protect the character and personality of our communities and to prevent them from being destroyed or violated. And so in this particular case, the Historic Preservation Overlay Zone is an absolute necessity. It's unfortunate because in many ways, you shouldn't have to protect small pockets. We should be able to say, the city of LA is a pretty great place. I would hate to see any of it destroyed, especially when it comes to the personality and character of the city of LA, the thing that brings people to town, like the Columbia Square project on Sunset. It was a famous studio, soon to be famous condos. And the tourists that come to town, a pretty significant economic driver, don't come to see our world famous condos. They come to see where history was made. Hollywood and Vine had a radio station that broadcast from Hollywood and Vine. And so I think it's a shame that we're losing so much of our character and personality, of our history, of our legacy, because it's not protected. So this is necessary. The larger picture is we should be able to protect the city of LA itself. And as for housing, we're actually losing housing stock, like the Gershwin is now empty. At one time, it had humans in it. We had that event there. And they're gone. And so in many ways, I think that we're playing we're moving things around, but we're not improving the quality of life. The irony of affordable housing is, when you talk about 59% employment, it's unaffordable. Why? Because people aren't earning a living, and they're not prospering. And as someone who was able to walk to work many years ago, but now can't because my job has moved to the west side. So Culver City, Santa Monica, or a lot of the post work is in Burbank and Glendale. So our jobs are leaving town, which means that it's tough to live here because there isn't work here. And I say that from firsthand experience. What can we do to make it more affordable in Hollywood? Well, absolutely. We need to improve the economy, bring jobs back to town, and then make sure people are connecting with them so that they have an opportunity to put their skills and education to work.
Thank you. Mr. Grady?
Yeah. So I started life off as a woodworker, and I restored old brownstones in Hoboken, New Jersey. And one of the things I think that we learned in Hoboken very early on was that unlike Jersey City to the south and Union City to the north, Hoboken kept its existing housing stock. It's stunningly beautiful. It's not as pretty as Park Slope or Brooklyn Heights, but it's nice. And so we kept those old buildings and we repurposed them. And it was a constant battle in the town to build bigger and newer, and it was easier often to knock the building and build something different. And thank heavens we never did, because that town is one of the most charming, prosperous towns along what's called the Gold Coast. Hoboken got it right. Jersey City botched it up. They lined the waterfront with high-risers, and to the north of Hoboken, they ruined the thing. So, and Stephen is right. It's all about history. You take away the soul of a place, you take away the beautiful woodwork, and you'll never get it back. In Ireland, in the last 15 years, because of their prosperity, they knocked a lot of the old farmers' cottages and built McMansions. And it's just a desperate-looking situation right now, how they ruined that countryside, sadly. By contrast, actually, fair play to Great Britain, they had planning and zoning laws way back, and they protected and preserved their beautiful small towns with their beautiful buildings. and it's a pity that Ireland didn't take a lesson from that. So I like the idea of preserving all buildings. I had to knock, for the most part, the old house that I renovated, the one that we live in Los Feliz, because of a hillside and bolting issues. But we did keep a lot of the existing materials and tried to rebuild it fairly closely to its, original intent. So I love historic stuff. I like the look of it. I like the feel of it. It makes me feel at home. And the notion that we would knock it down to build something new is incredible. So I like HPOZs, if I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Our last question before a couple of closing statements. In spite of its reputation, Hollywood is economically stratified, this particular neighborhood here, as well as Los Feliz and other parts of CD4, from the very rich to the very poor. How would you ensure, if you were elected, that members of our under-resourced communities and those that advocate with them would have a voice with your council office?
Well, first, if you're a city council person and you're making, the median household income in CD4 is around 50 grand. If you're making 180, you're making more than 3 times the median income. You don't get it. That's what happened in France. The king was eating like a king, and the peasants were starving, and that's why they had a revolution. That's an exaggeration, of course. Our leaders need to be making a salary that is closer to the median income so that they get it, so that they do go to Trader Joe's, so that they do chase a bargain, so that they get what most of the rest of us go through on a daily basis. So first, we hear all this talk about promises and how we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I'm about leading by example. I would love to make 180 grand. That's a nice chunk of change. But I would be unable, and I mean this sincerely, unable to lead CD4 by making that much more than most people. And I would submit to you, then I would have no idea what they're going through. So that's number one. I came from nothing. I came with $80 in my pocket. I grew up on a farm. I understand what it is not to have a lot, and I understand what it is to save pennies. And so I just feel I am so utterly, completely qualified to understand what folks are going through on a daily basis and to understand what it is to do without. And as I said at the Autry Museum in my closing statement last week, I'll probably not be the councilman who comes up here in the hills of Los Feliz and repaves you on a regular basis. Because you know what, you guys? You don't need it. We're doing pretty well up here. What we need to do is divert our assets and our resources to the parts of this city, and that might even be places that are not in CD4, to help them out. Because frankly, this city, it is shameful how some areas have so much and how some areas have so little. So, there you go. Thanks.
I can assure you that the people in Council District 4 will have a voice in Council District 4's council office. And I say this because I have been and I am a champion for open and transparent governance. And I mentioned that I shouldn't have to know so much about the law, but I invoked the California Brown Act, which is the open meeting law that guarantees you the right to participate in our city government. And I've invoked it at City Hall and won. And it shouldn't require me to teach City Hall about a 50-year-old state law, but it did. Then I went to the DWP Commission, and there are some people here that are concerned with how the DWP is functioning, and went to a meeting and again had to help the city attorney and the DWP Commission understand how the Brown Act requires them to behave. Then a third time at the Police Commission. So I assure you that I have a track record for fighting to make sure that people from all walks have the ability and the opportunity to participate in their government. I think it's a sad state of affairs, like yesterday, that I would have to go to City Council twice to participate in something so simple as our council member's own motion that he didn't show up to actually move forward. So 20 of us showed up for our 60 seconds of glory in public comment to speak to someone who wasn't there. But that's the process that I have been fighting, and that's the process I assure you will end. When you go to City Hall, you don't even use the front door, you use the back door. The front door is kept locked, it's for city staff. But at my father's church, his first church, there's a sign that said, "Your welcome awaits you." That's what we need at City Hall. And that's what I promise you, everybody will have that welcome. The opportunity to participate in a conversation on their own terms, because it's our job to remove obstacles, and sometimes that's simply removing some of the comprehension issues, because I don't understand the ballot measures. We were talking about the ballot measures ahead of time. Business is taking place in a way that we can't understand, and I don't know if it's by design or by simply disaster, but I do assure you that it is our right to participate in our city government, and that includes an open and transparent operation at City Hall, and that includes a door that's always open and a welcome that's always waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Each of the candidates will give a 3-minute, if they like, a closing statement, starting with Mr. Box.
Thank you. I love watching the Jumbotron. I feel like it. I'm honored to be here, and I'm grateful for your participation, and I had a good time here tonight. But at the same time, we're talking about some pretty serious issues. A crisis of traffic congestion, a crisis with regards to education, a crisis with regards to our city's budget, and what I would consider to be a crisis of leadership. And so that's why I'm running for city council, because I not only think we can do better, but I'm convinced that we must do better. So on March 8th, we're all going to have an opportunity to go to the polls and to participate in determining the future of Council District 4. And I stand before you as someone who I would offer is up against two very significant opponents. And they are apathy and indifference. There's 300,000 people in Council District 4. Only 10,000 voted last time round. The incumbent was unchallenged. Nobody even cared enough to run. Of the precincts, there are about 134 precincts, and they're approximately the same size. One of the precincts was won with 20 votes, which means that you could go win a precinct, and you could go get another one. The average precinct only required 63 people to win. And that's what we're dealing with. And I think it's an absolute abdication of responsibility for us not to reach out to others and get them to the polls. So I ask you, if you could get to 5 people and they could each get to 5 people, you personally have set in motion enough voters to go and get a precinct, regardless of who you vote for. But I think one of the greatest things we could do is participate and send a very clear message that we care. Hope you care enough to vote for Stephen Box, but I really hope you care enough to vote, and I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, come on, give it up. Jeez. My wife had to leave to put the kids to bed, so please, be nice.
She's not here to support you, right?
Regardless of what happens, Stephen, this is a fantastic exercise. I think you and I together, we have shaken this district up, regardless of what ends up at the end. And this is a great example of democracy, and it will never be the same again, regardless. So it's a good thing. How do I follow that? Stephen, you're such a great speaker. So, I don't do tweeting. I don't do photo ops. I just do things. I would say I'm a progressive who hates waste. So you could call me a Tea Party guy when I hate to see money being wasted, but you could call me the most liberal of Democrats in my compassion for folks who are not doing as well as I. I hate waste, whether it's a waste of our tax dollars, a waste of a time better spent, a waste of a child's future because we failed them. Waste and me don't get on. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do is to lead by example. We've heard all the promises before. We hear the Republicans talking about it right now. Of course, it turns out they're not really saving any money. They're spending it on the things that they want to spend it on. I'm trying to put my money where my mouth is. But before I even step inside the door at City Hall, I want everyone to understand I'm sacrificing first myself. This is what we are taught in the Bible, and this is what I want to do in City Hall. Both my own salary, I would refuse a car. I have a Honda. I'm fine. I don't need a fancy city car. I want to cut our own council staff by half because we need those positions in other agencies, just as Stephen was talking about in planning or in street services. And I don't think anyone has any credibility anymore. There's so little trust left. A politician, or don't call me that, a public servant, has got to go in there completely fresh with complete credibility to be able to say to the folks whom you're asking to cut, I've already cut everything. I've cut my staff. I've cut my salary. I've given up the car. Now I need you to help out a little and cut a little bit on your own. Secondly, we're going to have to go back to the voters, whether we like it or not, because this government has botched the whole thing up. We're going to have to ask them for additional taxes. The only way that voters are willing to do that is if they see our government. And that doesn't matter if it is the $2 cappuccino or the $180,000 council salary. If they see that we have cleaned up our house. So I'm looking to clean up our house so that people have trust again in government, and so that we can restore the things that we all hold dear, like public education, like social services, and yes, something as unsexy as street services. My name is Tomas O'Grady, and I'm asking you respectfully for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This concludes our forum. I want to just, before you dash off, just acknowledge a couple of people. Thank you to the candidates for being here tonight. I know this must be a tremendous burden to run for office. I think they'll probably stay by to chat. I would if I were running for office. So they'll probably be here. I'd also like to thank the Hollywood United Neighborhood Council and LA Voice for partnering with us on this, and especially to our volunteers tonight who helped out with the technology and taking care of all the details from welcoming you to making sure the lights were on. A quick shout out to Nathan French, who I get to work with and who really pours his life into this neighborhood selflessly, standing in the back. Thank you, sir, for everything that you do. And most of all, as these two gentlemen have said, make sure you go vote and take a handful of people with you. Remind them to vote in this very small, kind of easy to forget about election, but very important to us. Thank you, guys. Good night.